All right, so get this, those bright red candies that everybody loves, right? Well, it turns out that that color might actually have like a dark side to it. We're diving deep into the world of red dye number 3 today. The FDA just banned it in food and drugs. I mean, there's a lot to this story. We've got FDA announcements, scientific studies,
Right.
advocacy groups like the Center for Science and the Public Interest and the Environmental Working Group. We've got industry perspectives on this as well.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack all of it so that you can make those really smart choices about what you're putting in your body.
You know, it's interesting because this is not some new fad or, a quick discovery.
Right.
This debate has been going on for decades,
Right.
which makes this FDA decision even more fascinating.
So let's rewind a little bit.
Okay.
What exactly is red dye number 3?
Okay.
And why has it been causing such a stir?
Okay, so red dye number 3, or erythrocene, as it's known in the science world, is a synthetic color that's derived from petroleum. And it's really the go-to ingredient for creating that like almost neon cherry red color that we see in so many different products.
Oh, yeah.
And the controversy really heats up when you bring in the FDA's Delaney Clause.
Okay.
This clause is really straightforward. If an additive is found to cause cancer
Right.
in either humans or animals, it's a no-go.
So hold on. If the Delaney Clause is so clear-cut,
Right.
why was red dye number 3 allowed in food for so long?
Yeah.
I mean, back in 1990, the FDA banned it in cosmetics and topical drugs because it was linked to cancer in rats.
That is the head scratcher, isn't it? It's this regulatory paradox. It's been fueling this controversy for years. So the FDA acknowledged the cancer risk in those rat studies, even going so far as to ban the dye in certain products. But when it came to food, they held back. And their argument was that the way cancer developed in those rats wouldn't really translate to humans.
Okay.
And plus, they claimed that typical human exposure to the dye was much lower than the levels that caused the problems in the studies.
Okay. But advocacy groups like CSPI and EWG have been sounding the alarm for years, haven't they? They've been pretty consistent in their push to ban it altogether.
Absolutely. They have been pointing to this very inconsistency and calling for stronger action.
Right.
Any potential risk, especially when it comes to something that we ingest, is a risk too far in their book. And their concerns were really amplified even more in 2021 when a study in California linked red dye number 3 to potential behavioral issues in kids.
Oh, wow.
Things like, difficulty paying attention.
Yeah.
And this study really poked holes in the FDA's stance on safety and kind of hinted that there might be more to this story than just the cancer risk.
So on one hand, we have scientific studies raising red flags and advocacy groups demanding change. But what about the companies that were actually using this dye?
Right.
How have they been navigating this whole controversy?
Well, what's interesting is that even before the FDA's recent ban, some big-name candy brands were starting to make changes.
Okay.
Ferrara, the folks behind Brax Candies, started phasing out red dye number 3 in early 2023. And just Born, the makers of those adorable Peeps, completely stopped using it after Easter 2024.
So it sounds like some companies were already sensing like the shift in public opinion and the growing scientific evidence even before the official ban came down. But if they were ditching red dye number 3, what were they using instead?
A lot of companies turned to red dye number 40 as a supposedly safer alternative.
Okay.
But hold on, there's a twist.
Uh-oh.
Even red dye number 40 has its own baggage. California banned it in schools because of potential links to behavioral issues in children, very similar to red dye number 3.
Yeah.
It really begs the question, is any synthetic dye truly safe?
It's like picking your poison, right?
Right.
And then there's the industry groups, the National Confectioners Association and the Consumer Brands Association.
Right.
Where do they stand on all of this?
They've been walking a bit of a tightrope, really. Yeah. On the one hand, they're emphasizing their commitment to food safety.
Right.
And compliance with all the regulations. They're following the FDA's lead and putting consumer well-being first and center.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're obviously juggling these concerns with business interests.
Yeah.
It's a very delicate balance.
Definitely a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about you, the listener.
Okay.
At the end of the day, how do you make sense of all of this? What does this all actually mean for what you choose to buy and consume?
It really does all boil down to making those informed decisions.
Yeah.
But that can be tough when you're navigating this world of, complex science and ever-changing regulations.
Just trying to solve a puzzle with some of the pieces missing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where this red dye number 3 ban gets really interesting.
Okay.
It could actually be a sign of like a bigger shift
Okay.
in how we think about all of those additives in our food.
You mean like a ripple effect?
Yeah.
Kind of like what we saw with trans fats and partially hydrogenated oils.
Exactly.
Those were once considered totally fine, and now they're like public enemy number one.
Yeah, precisely. And the red dye number 3 story could be that tipping point, forcing us to really scrutinize all those artificial colors
Right.
that are lurking on those ingredient lists.
So if red dye number 3, with all its years of back and forth, is finally getting the boot, does that set a precedent for other dyes?
Whoa.
Like red dye number 40, for instance?
Yeah.
I mean, that one has its own set of concerns, as we discussed earlier.
Right.
Could it be next?
It's certainly possible. And this begs the question, why did it take so long for the FDA to act on red dye number 3?
Right.
We're talking decades of advocacy scientific studies.
Yeah.
Even a state-level ban in California.
Some critics are saying the FDA has been dragging their feet when it comes to food additives, putting industry interests ahead of public health.
Yeah.
If it was banned in cosmetics and topical drugs back in 1990, why did it take over 30 years to apply the same logic to food?
It's a valid criticism. The FDA has been called out for relying too heavily on industry-funded studies and also for having safety standards that some experts consider, outdated and insufficient.
Yeah.
While the agency insists its decisions are based on the best available science.
Yeah.
This whole red dye number 3 situation exposes the need for more transparency and a more proactive approach to safeguarding public health.
It really makes you wonder what other additives might be flying under the radar.
Right.
Are there others out there that should be raising red flags but haven't gotten enough attention yet?
That's a question worth pondering, and here's another layer to think about.
Okay.
This ban brings the U.S. closer to regulations in Europe.
Oh, really?
They banned red dye number 3 way back in 1994, except for like a teeny tiny exception with maraschino cherries.
So basically the U.S. is playing catch-up on this issue.
It seems that way.
Europe seems to have like a more precautionary approach to food additives, right?
Yeah.
They put the burden on manufacturers to prove something is safe before it hits the market.
Exactly.
Whereas the U.S. traditionally takes more of a risk-based approach.
Right.
Meaning that a substance isn't banned unless there's like hard evidence of harm
Right.
at typical exposure levels.
Exactly.
But as we see with red dye number 3, this approach can be slow and reactive.
Yeah, it can be.
It's a complicated issue with no easy solution.
Definitely.
But hopefully, this deep dive is giving you, the listener, a clearer picture of like the history, the science, and the whole regulatory maze surrounding red dye number 3.
Yeah, and more importantly, we want to equip you with the knowledge
Right.
to make your own informed choices about what you consume.
Exactly.
Whether you decide to, steer clear of red dye number 3 altogether, or just be more mindful of your intake.
Right.
It's empowering to have this information.
And remember, the story isn't over.
Oh, yeah.
Several other states are trying to get red dye number 3 banned.
Right.
So the push for change is definitely gaining momentum.
This ban could be like a catalyst
Yeah.
for a much broader reassessment of how we regulate all food additives in the U.S. It's a conversation that really needs to continue.
Definitely.
So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
let's shift our focus to what this all means for you personally. How can you actually take this knowledge and apply it to your everyday life?
We've covered a lot of ground. The science, the regulations, the industry's response. But what does it all boil down to for us as individuals? What are like the real world takeaways from this deep dive into red dye number 3?
Well, as they say, knowledge is power, but only when we actually use it. I think the most important takeaway here is to become a truly informed consumer.
Yeah.
Don't just glance at labels,
Right.
really read them, look beyond all the marketing hype and the pretty packaging, and get to know what's actually in the food that you're buying.
And it goes beyond just dodging red dye number 3, right?
Right.
It's about being aware of all those artificial colors and additives that are practically staples in processed foods.
That's exactly it. This whole red dye number 3 situation is a great reminder
Yeah.
to kind of shift towards a diet that's more focused on whole foods.
Okay.
Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins.
Right.
Those are the building blocks of a healthy diet.
Yeah.
And they don't come with a long list of questionable ingredients.
So it's like hitting the reset button and getting back to basics.
Yeah.
Cooking more meals at home where you have control over what goes in.
Exactly.
I know it might take a little more effort,
Yeah.
but isn't that worth it for your health?
Absolutely. And there's another important takeaway here. Don't underestimate the power of your voice.
Oh, yeah.
You can be an advocate for change support organizations like CSPI and EWG
Right.
that are fighting for tougher regulations and a safer food supply for everyone.
Yeah.
Reach out to your elected officials
Exactly.
and let them know that you care about these issues.
And we can also vote with our wallets, right?
Yes.
Supporting companies that are transparent about their ingredients and genuinely prioritize consumer health.
Absolutely.
We can choose products that ditch those artificial dyes and all the additives.
Exactly. The food industry ultimately responds to what consumers want.
Right?
If we collectively demand healthier, more natural products, they'll have to listen.
This red dye number 3 journey has been a winding one. It's taken us through the science, the regulations, the efforts of those pushing for change. But at its core, it's a story about choices. We have the power to choose what we eat, what companies we support, and ultimately what kind of food system we want for ourselves and for future generations.
That's a great way to put it. This ban is definitely a win for consumer health, but it's just one step in a much larger movement.
For sure.
We need to keep asking those questions, demanding transparency, and making those informed choices that align with our values.